Hey guys, so today I'm going to be going over my cast on Ignite Demon Form Incinerate Infernalist. Yes, very long, lots of words, actual tongue twister. But I want to talk about this build today and kind of want to preface by saying that this is not a good build. As you guys may know if you've come hang out on my stream before, I like to find builds that are unorthodox, builds that are not necessarily meta, and builds that are, clunky and try to make them work. And in my opinion, Incinerate was the perfect candidate for that. Incinerate is, in my opinion, very cool looking and also has a pretty cool mechanic that I like, which is, Ignite, right? It's a skill that doesn't do any hit damage, really. It ignites as though it's hitting, kind of like, gas arrow or like flame wall, something like that. It doesn't really hit, but it does damage over time as though it were to hit. Now, when I went into this build, I wanted to focus on Incinerate, and I wanted to scale Incinerate with Demon Form. So if you guys didn't know, Demon Form is a ability that you get as an Infernalist, which turns you into a demon, right? And it gives you this stacking, buff slash debuff that makes it so that you increase your spell damage every single second you're in Demon Form, every stack that you get. But with each increasing stack, you also end up taking damage over time based on your maximum health. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword in a way. Now, my goal was to get to super high levels of Demonflame, and then by using that, scaling the amount of damage that Incinerate does, and using that to basically be the build, right? And it was definitely not very successful. Now, Incinerate itself doesn't do very good damage, and that's why I wanted to use Demonflame to scale it. But at the end of the day, there really was no reason for me to use Incinerate over another skill. And in my opinion, even with the stacking ability of Demonflame, Incinerate really just ended up being not good, even at the very high levels of Demonflame, the high end of Demonflame. So we had to kind of fix that, right? And that's where Solar Orb and Cast on Ignite came into play. So what I found out was that Solar Orb actually has a very high number when it comes to the upfront Ignite damage that it does. Like if you look at this, right? Look at this. Like the Ignite damage is huge, the fire damage is huge. Like it's a pretty big skill. And right now I'm not scaling it with anything, right? I'm not even in Demon Form yet. So it's got a pretty big damage number at level 21 only. When you scale this higher with additional spell levels and things like that, it gets even better. Now, that's kind of where the build started kind of, I guess, turning. The wheels started turning and making this build work. And in the campaign, it was pretty dang strong, dropping comets on people with a cast on Ignite kind of setup. But at the end of the day, it just wasn't as good as some of the builds out there. Now, to preface this, right, this build is a low life Demon Form build that also uses, oh shoot, I didn't, I kind of refunded my skills earlier to kind of make certain things work, but I was testing some stuff. But this is a build that uses Demon Form with low life setup, and then it also uses Pyromantic Pact, which gets rid of your need for mana, because Cast on Ignite requires a huge amount of mana to use, because you keep basically casting your comets that do a lot of damage and also takes a lot of mana if you're proccing in the comets over and over again, right? Because if you're not proccing the comets really quickly, you're pretty much doing no damage on a Cast on Ignite build or a Cast on X build, right? So it really required either a huge mana source or B, something to completely get rid of mana, which in my opinion, Pyromantic Pact was the perfect thing to do so. Now, how Pyromantic Pact works is that your mana is replaced by this thing called Infernal Flame. And whenever you use mana, it will go ahead and increase this Infernal Flame down here. You see down here, there's Infernal Flame. It's not a mana bar, right? And every time you use it, it increases it up until the maximum amount, which is your mana. the capacity for your mana, and when you hit max, it makes you take damage. And what that damage is it says right here, take maximum life and energy shield as fire damage when Infernal Flame reaches maximum. So basically, when it hits maximum, you take your entire energy shield and life as damage. So this one would be 8.3k, 8.4k energy shield, and then you would take this amount of life, 231 life as damage, right? Normally, that would kill you, but because it is fire damage, it can be mitigated with fire resistance. So as you can see here on my build, I have 90% fire resistance, which is the maximum that you can get in Path of Exile right now. Now, how you get this high is because normally 75 is the maximum. How you get this high is by using gems, jewels. So as you can see here, 2% to maximum fire resistance, right? And I have this on 7 jewels total. That is how we get this situation where we are at 90% maximum fire resistance, and also we get another one from here, right? 1% of all maximum resistances, making that rounded out to 90%. So that is how you do that and how you upkeep Pyromantic Pact, because normally you are really just chucking comets, right? And it's just proccing it over and over and over and over again. So that is kind of how this build overall works. Now, I'd say the very well optimized Demonflame builds can go to about 200 to 300, 400-ish area with everything combined with like recoup life and things like that. But there is also a tech where you use this here, Mask of the Stitched Demon. Now, this is probably going to get changed very, very soon once GG gets back from vacation. I'll be highly surprised if they don't change this. But how this works is, normally, Mask of the Stitched Demon, how it works is that it gets rid of all your energy shield, but in return, gives you a huge amount of life recovery, right? Huge amount of regen. But if you turn into demon form with your normal helmet on, it snapshots your stats. So even if you add something on your tree that gives you more energy shield, less energy shield, whatever it might be, it doesn't actually change the amount of stats for life and energy shield that you have. And I think it's the same thing for mana as well. But because of that, if we put on Stitched Demon, we don't actually lose our energy shield, and we just gain the regen. So that is how people get to ridiculously high levels of Demonflame by using this snapshotting technique. Now, some people might call it an exploit, but I mean, snapshotting has always existed in the past in Path of Exile. It is a thing, right? There's a word for it, snapshotting, for a reason. And people don't just go like, oh, you're glitching your stats or something like that. Some people consider it a bug, right? And it probably is a bug, let's be real, right? But it's working as like it should. Maybe they didn't intend it for it to work this way, but it is technically working as it should, because your demon form does snapshot your gear and stuff. And again, that's why you don't get not your gear, your HP and energy shield. And that's why you can't gain any stats when you are in demon form. So there's that, right? So if you guys want to go the Stitched Demon build, you know, that's totally up to you guys. And what I will say is probably going to get nerfed soon. But for me, I use this because I was very poor at the time when I built this build, and I still am. I had like 1 Divine and like 20 Exalts. So if I wanted to get the gear that was required to get this build up and running, I would have to spend a lot of money. But because I'm El Cheapo, I'm like, all right, you know what? We'll use Stitched Demon until we can get the gear required, or it gets nerfed, right? But at this point, I'm not really pushing this character forward anymore. Now, we'll talk about all the gear and stuff a little bit later in the video, but the reason why I don't want to push this character any further and spend any more currency on it is because of the tree. Now, this tree has basically been completely figured out in terms of how to do the whole build of Demonflame and Pyromantic Pact, which again we'll talk about in a little bit. And because of that, it ends up being that you have to spend a lot of nodes just to work on sustaining Demonflame and sustaining Pyromantic Pact, and there's not much flexibility out of that. And also because Demonflame works in a way where you just don't need increases to damage because it's negligible compared to the increase in damage it gives you, it makes it so that all you need to focus on is maintaining your Demonflame and also giving yourself survivability, which at the end of the day does not promote any form of like build diversity because it's just so limiting. So that's why I end up not wanting to play this build anymore, because for me, my joy in Path of Exile is finding ways to make builds better or more unique or more fun. Whereas this build right now, it really feels like there's nothing much I can do to change up how it works or like make it more efficient or things like that. It really is just survivability and Demonflame sustain. So that's why I ended up ultimately not like, you know, trying to max out my resist, right? That's why we didn't push it further than 86. That's why we're doing all this right here. And that's why we ended up sticking with the Stitch Demon, because just at the end of the day, it doesn't excite me anymore. But that doesn't mean it's not a fun build to play, right? Now, as I mentioned at the top, this build is not very good. The only reason why I made this was because I wanted to use Incinerate and kind of have that kind of fantasy of like being a demon, you know, witch doing like fire spells, right? That is the sole reason why I made this build and tried to make it work. Fire spells are not in a good place right now in Path of Exile. I think Fireball's okay, but other than that, none of the other fire spells really do very well. Now, if you wanted a good build for cast on Ignite meteors, right, comets, that can be done with Hex Blast. And that is actually how I came upon building this character in the first place and making it work. I actually followed this guide right here. I'm going to link the thumbnail on the screen somewhere and link the guide in the description, right? It's a guide by Cat Kills, who does a really, really good job of showing you and showcasing the cast on Ignite Demonflame Infernalist. It's basically the same build as what I'm doing right now, because I followed his build guide to basically come up with the tree for the most part and make it work. It's basically the same thing, except instead of using Solar Orb to proc cast on Ignite, he uses Hex Blast. Now, again, the reason why I didn't do that is because I wanted to kind of have this fantasy of being like a Demonflame witch with like fire spells, right? So that's kind of why I did that. And if you aren't a fan of using like chaos spells to ignite, like, and doing all that stuff, because it really takes advantage of this one right here that makes it so that you can ignite with any damage. So you're not really like burning anything. You're like burning it, but like through this passive node. So if you do want to use like fire stuff, sure, right, you can follow this build. But if you actually wanted a good and efficient and actually reasonable build, like that's not just bad, go and follow his. But okay, that is a lot of prefacing of this build. I'm sorry, guys. I will actually get into the build now. So right now, in terms of the gems, right, I have Demon Form with Second Wind on it. I don't really have anything else that I really think I want to put on it, honestly. And I wanted to just keep like, you know, the amount of decks and stuff at low. So I put just one Second Wind gem on this. You don't really need anything else. Your Demon Form lasts long enough to come back off a cooldown and not use the one that reduces cooldown and stuff like that. So that is what we have on Demon Form. We have our Infernal Hound, our dog, which currently is using Meat Shield, Elemental Army, Minion Mastery, and Culling Strike. Now, in my opinion, the dog really is kind of a throwaway skill in a way, because like you are actually killing your dog off a lot because of Pyromantic Pact. Every time you use Pyromantic Pact, it does damage to you, and by, you know, extension, it'll do damage to your dog because your dog shares the damage that you take from hits. And Pyromantic Pact, it counts as getting hit. So you're actually killing off your dog quite a bit, and it's really just kind of there when it's there. I guess you don't really notice it that much, but we don't really have anything on our ascendancy tree that's better than this because we're not going crypt. I don't need flammability, to be honest. Every now and then, maybe like at a boss, for example, if you are not high enough Demonflame stacks, you might want to end up using flammability for that, just to increase the amount of damage that you do to the boss. So you can start getting the comets going, right? Because your main damage at the end of the day on single target is not fire. It's from your comets. So this is just there to bolster your damage in case you ever go into a boss with lower Demonflame stacks. Contagion, honestly, useless. I don't even know why I have this on here. Next is Solar Orb. Again, this is going to be your main procer for the cast on Ignite setup because it does so much upfront Ignite damage. So we're basically trying to maximize our upfront damage from Ignites. So we're doing everything that we can to increase that damage. So I have considered casting for 40% more damage. Even though it says spell hits and this doesn't technically hit, you know, it ignites as though it hits, right? Then we have +1 levels to supported fire skills. All gems like scale very well with levels, so we're going to do that. We did controlled destruction, 30% more damage on hits and ailments. And then we are also doing concentrated effect, 40% more area damage, but 50% less area effect. And the reason why we use concentrated effect is because we're not actually using the pulse damage. So if you put down Solar Orb, you'll notice that it pulses, right? And we're like, oh, well, less area effect's probably not as good, right? Well, the thing is, we're not actually using the pulse damage. What we're using to ignite enemies is this right here, Ignite. And how that works is that if you look at the tooltip right here, you have an ignite radius that is 1 meter. And then it says right here, enemies that are very close to the orb are ignited. So basically, you just put this on top of the enemy and it instantly does this ignite damage right here. You don't care about the pulse damage really. You're really just worrying about the ignite damage because that is where you get the cast on ignites from. So we're trying to maximize on that, and therefore we use concentrated effect because really you have to put that thing on top of the enemy anyways to get that to happen. So that's why we use that. Now, Incinerate, this is our AoE spell that we use when we are not, you know, scaled up with our Demonflame. Now, it still doesn't do much damage, but it's better than using Solar Orb because at that point, you're not really proccing your cast on Ignites yet because it's kind of, you know, like I said, you don't do as much Ignite damage because your Demonflame isn't scaled up. So this is what we use while we're waiting. And we have Arcane Tempo, Mobility, Searing Flame, and Minion Pact. Now, here's the thing, right? We have mobility on here because you move like a goddamn snail when you don't have this on. Like, I will take it off right now. You are just so slow when moving around with this. So I use mobility on this. And honestly, you don't really need like any like real increases of damage because your demon form kind of takes care of everything else. But I would say that putting mobility on there probably is a, you know, give or take, right? If you want it on there, if you want a little bit more ability, put it on there. If you don't mind being just like moving like a snail, sure, take it off, right? But the thing is, you probably will want it on there because you're not doing that much damage to make it so that you can, like, you need it to be able to kite enemies a little bit. So we do that, right? We have Arcane Tempo to increase the cast speed. We have Searing Flame to increase the ignite damage. And we also have Minion Pact as another way to increase the amount of damage that we do. It'll, again, take health away from the dog. But as you can see, it really doesn't take health away from the dog that quick. It really takes a while. So that's why we use that. Now, Arcane Tempo. We use this because Incinerate has this thing where it deals 40% more damage per stage. So if you use Incinerate, you'll see there's this ticking number, right? And you'll also see when the max stage is hit because you'll see that little animation right there and that changes your Incinerate. So one thing to note about Demon form is that, you know, it increases your spell damage, right? So, and that number can get really, really high. So right here, right? Increases 17% spell damage per Demonflame. So you're increasing your spell damage by a lot. So anything that is not a more multiplier on this character really does nothing. So Incinerate, the more stages you have, the higher level stage, it's a more multiplier. So you're going to want to try to get that multiplier as high as you can. That way you are multiplying the amount of damage that you do as opposed to an additive thing. So that's why I use Arcane Tempo there to just increase my speed at getting to maximum levels. And then Searing Flame, obviously a more multiplier for magnitude for ignites, and then this is a more multiplier for damage. Again, in general, you don't want anything that's not a more multiplier, and you'll see that on our skill tree as well when we go over that. Now, cast on Ignite, this is where our bread and butter is for our single target damage and also just like clear after we get enough stacks, right? It's going to be casting Comets, and we have Impetus, Spell Echo, and Energy Retention on this. That way we can, proc our Comets more with both of these, and Spell Echo, it makes it so you cast a second Comet every time you use it, right? Normally, Spell Echo makes it so you cast slower, but on cast on X abilities, like cast on Ignite, cast on Freeze, cast on whatever, right? It's all the same cast speed, so it doesn't matter. This is basically essentially just doubling your damage. So this is really, really good. So you want to use that. For Orb of Storms, this is for single target again. So normally bosses in this game have a very, very long wind-up time before they actually can drop onto the field. So we usually just place an Orb of Storms down, and then that will shock the boss when he comes out, and it'll increase the amount of damage that you do to the boss with everything else, right? So for this, we have Overcharge. Shocks have 50% less duration, but we make up for that because we have this one right here, Stormfire. Shocks from supported skills don't expire on ignited enemies because, obviously we're igniting the enemy all the time. So these two are really good together. And then we also have Execrate, which increases your chance to inflict ailments, aka shock, by 100%. It gives it 8-second cooldown, but that doesn't matter, right? Because once we shock the enemy, it's basically on the boss forever. And then we have Conduction, more chance to shock. Basically, we just use Orb of Storms as a chance to shock. And then our other aura is going to be, our other spirit gem is going to be Grim Feast. I think pretty much we all know if you're running Energy Shield build, you're going to want to run Grim Feast. Because it's just going to increase your survivability by a lot. So yeah, that is what we're doing for the skills. And then for the passive tree, as I mentioned earlier, this is pretty much fixed. There's nothing that you can really do too much to tweak the passive tree in a way that changes a lot. And again, this is why I ultimately decided not to push this this build to the super end game, just because like the passive tree itself is kind of one of the reasons why I like making new characters and trying to tweak things around, make things better, min-maxed. And for the most part, this passive tree really has been min-maxed. There's nothing really much you could do with it, unfortunately. So, but I'll just go over it, right? For our Ascendancy, we have our Demon Form. So we take this one as our first Ascendancy. This will basically carry us through the entire campaign. Demon Form is just super powerful and just gives us so much spell damage, right? And then with our second one, we're going to go this one, Loyal Hellhound. Basically, you don't want to take Pyromantic Pact until you can get the whole setup through. And then third, we're going to get Pyromantic Pact. And then fourth, we're going to get this one, which makes so all sources of damage can contribute to Ignite. Now, the reason why we do this, and you might be like, oh, that's kind of useless, right? Well, actually, no. If you look at our kind of damage numbers, right? We actually do a lot of chaos damage, and that's because we run double Mings, right? We run doubles Mings, which gives us extra damage as chaos damage. So it's actually pretty good to have that one, even if we're just using skills that always ignite. It just makes the magnitude bigger, right? So there's that. So that is the tree right here. Now, when I say that you don't want to grab this until you get your tree setup, what I mean is you need the minimum, okay? The minimum is 7 jewel sockets and the +2 to maximum fire resistance for all of them. And then you need this one right here, which gives you 1% to all maximum resistances. And you also need this right here, reduced effect of ignite on you, because when you're doing your damage to yourself with Pyromantic Pact, we are doing fire damage to yourself, which gives you a chance to ignite yourself on fire. So you're going to want to take less damage from that. So basically, you're going to want these 7 jewel sockets. You're going to want these right here. You also want Zealot's Oath and Eternal Youth to make it so your life flask recovery applies to your energy shield. And you also want these ones, your life recoup ones. So that is kind of like at the minimum what you want to run with before you can start doing the Pyromantic Pact, because that is what it requires. And that's also the reason why this build is so limiting, because you just have a lot of travel. Now, the other reason why this build is so limiting is because of the way Demonflame works, right? And I don't know if I mentioned this part before, I don't remember, but the reason why Demonflame is so limiting is because it gives you so much spell damage that anything that you take that's like increased damage, like increased fire damage, increased cold damage, increased spell damage, it's just nothing. It doesn't hold a candle compared to the amount of damage and spell damage that you just get from Demon Form. 17% just for 1 stack, and oftentimes people are stacking this to 200 to 300 stack plus. And if you're using the Stitched Demon kind of like snapshotting tech, it's going to even higher. Now, that is probably going to get nerfed soon, and we'll talk about that later. But, you know, off of like a well-built Demonflame build, even without that, you're probably getting to around 200 to 300% Demonflame or 200 to 300 Demonflame stacks, which is a lot of spell damage. So for the most part, what you're going to be doing on your skill tree really is just going to be building your base for being able to sustain Pyromantic Pact, right? And Demonflame. And the rest of it really is just survivability. That's all it is. Survivability and Demonflame and your ability to sustain. Now, you also want to get these meta skill ones, right? Making so that you're triggering your meta skills a lot more. Making so that your comments are coming down more often and things like that. So that's what you really want to do. We also take this right here because this really helps you a lot with stun. Stun is a real problem when you're running with such low health. So being able to turn your energy shield into your stun threshold is very, very useful. So we take that. And then these damage is recouped as life is really important because later on in your Demonflame stacks, you're going to be ticking down a lot of health, right? Well, you can increase your survivability when doing that by taking these nodes Loose Flesh, because when you're dealing damage to yourself via Pyromantic Pact, you are actually going to be able to recover that health whenever you're dealing a lot of damage to yourself using that. So we're going to wait for the stacks to... I'm going to fast forward and have it basically show us at high stacks, and then I'm going to show you how much we can recoup just using that. Okay, so my character doesn't have a lot of regen base off of like the gear and stuff like that, so it's going to start ticking down pretty soon, but we're going to start using Pyromantic Pact, right? And then as you can see, as we deal damage to ourselves, we start regenning. And this regen overflows. So it stacks even though you're not actually regenning your health anymore, because it'll overflow into your energy shield, right? But it'll continue to basically heal you until it runs out on your energy shield, and then you can start using it again, and then you will recoup life again. And this is what you can do to keep your regen basically topped off. The more you cast, the more damage you deal to yourself, the more you'll heal your life. So that's kind of how you keep yourself, your Demonflame upkeep even higher, using damage recoup as life. Now, okay, so that's that, right? So those are kind of the basics of this tree. Basically survivability. You want to grab the damage recouped as life to make sure you can sustain Demonflame for a little bit longer. You're also going to want to grab these stun threshold nodes right here. Now, I also have this right here for reduced effective freeze, and your freeze threshold is based off your energy shield, because I was finding that I was having a lot of issues with getting frozen. Now, this could be potentially fixed if you were using a freeze charm. But personally, I like having the stun charm because you know, being stunned sucks, right? So I have the stun charm, and if you had another slot for on a belt, right, you could put your freeze charm there, and you probably wouldn't have to run this at all. The slows are a little bit annoying too, so this helps out the slows, but mileage may vary. You could just change that up. I also took this right here for just ignoring resists when enemies are frozen, because comets will freeze enemies a lot. But yeah, that's pretty much the tree. Life nodes, sustain, Pyromantic Pact, and Demonflame, and meta skills. Now for gear, right? I don't have very good gear because I decided to drop this character, right? I didn't want to invest any more money into this character. But what I'll say is for the gear, your minimum requirements are Ghost Writhe right here. Now, if you can get it corrupted, you can get it to have a higher number of maximum life converted to energy shield, because the less life that we have on this build, the better. So you're going to want to try to get this to as high as you can. I think 60% is probably the highest you can get it to. It starts out at 50 and can go all the way up to 60. And you're going to want to corrupt for that. Now, this is required, right? Because you're going to want to get your life as low as possible. Then we also have 2 Ming's rings. And these are going to be really good because they also reduce your maximum life, and your global defense are reduced, which also reduces your maximum life. So these 2 rings are very, very powerful because of that, just to get your life lower. And you can also add quality onto them as well to make it so that number is higher. So as you can see, both of mine are at 20% quality for that reason. So we have that. And these are basically the 3 required things. And then for your rest of your gear, right, you're going to want to have on every piece of gear as high life regeneration as possible on all of them. So 36, like this one has 36.3, right? I think it can go up to like 38. But again, we added more quality onto it because it increases the life modifier, so more regen, right? So you're going to want to have life regen, flat life regen as high as you can on every single piece of gear. Your glove, unfortunately, cannot get that. So you're going to want to get as much resistances on your glove as possible, because this, you know, this setup is running 3 pieces of unique gear at the minimum. So you're going to want to get as much resistance as you can on your gloves. Boots, of course, movement speed, resistances, also regen. I don't have regen on this build because I'm currently, you know, like I said, I didn't want to invest too much into this build. So I'm currently using the Stitched Demon Snapshotting tech to make up for the lack of regen there. And then for your necklace, you're going to want, again, regen. You're going to want +2 or +3 to spells. I don't have that on here yet. That would have been something I invested into later. And hey guys, sorry I forgot to mention in the video, but you also need damage recouped as life on your amulet as well. So you're going to want regen plus levels to spells and damage recouped as life as a minimum on your necklace. And then make up for any like resistance that you don't have. Get more energy shield on this to make sure that you're, you know, just surviving longer, things like that. And then also you're going to want Anoint Resilient Soul. Resilient Soul is this node right here on the tree. Increase life regeneration by 20% and 5% damage recouped as life. Both stats we really, really need, right? And it's very easy to get this anointed. It's very, very cheap. So you're going to want to grab that as well. And then on your helmet, if you're using Stitch Demon, right? All you need to do is get as much energy shield on this as possible, because you're not going to be wearing this helmet most of the time. You're just using it for the snapshotting for the energy shield. But if you are using this, if you are not using the Stitch Demon tech, which again, I think is probably going to get nerfed or fixed next patch, you're going to want to have as much energy shield in here as possible, regen, and also resistances. These are all just like very, very specific pieces of gear, and as a result are going to be quite expensive to build. Weapon, we don't need anything, right? We don't need a weapon because our demon form does not use weapon. I just have a weapon on here just because I want to. Just because I want to have it on the character, right? So that's kind of it, right? You're going to want resistances on everything, basically. You don't really have to do it on your necklace if you can avoid it. So you get other stats as well. But if you can't, then you can also put it on here. But again, resistance on everything. Boots you're going to want. Movement speed. You're going to want and you're going to want regen on everything, right? Except for gloves, because you can't get it on gloves. And then this one is going to want +3 to spells, regen, and then also survivability and resilient soul. Helmet, again, as much energy shield as possible. And if you're not using the Stitch Demon tech, you're going to want to get some resistances as well, and regen. So yeah, gear is pretty straightforward, but it's also very hard to get because people are using this build. Everybody uses the same gear. So, and it's like outside of this build, people don't use this gear, right? So there's not that much supply on the market, and the supply that is there is very expensive because everybody using this build is using this gear. So yeah, but that about wraps up this build guide and build video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Again, I would recommend you guys, if you do want to run a cast on Ignite build with Demonflame, do Hex Blast. Don't do what I do. What I do is stupid, but I love being stupid. So there is that. So if you're, along for the ride of being stupid and want to play this, weird fantasy of being like this demon form fire user, right? Go ahead and use this build, and it's probably the best way to use Incinerate. I'm gonna be honest. Incinerate just doesn't do enough damage on its own. Oh, please buff Incinerate. It's bad. But yeah. All right. I don't know where to go with this, but I've had something to say, but I don't remember. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please, as always, the best way to support the channel is by hitting that sub button. And also, let me know down in the comment section below what your thoughts are. And also, I stream every single night on twitch.tv/MisoXShiru starting at 10 p.m. PST. So I'd love to see you guys there and hang out. Right now, I'm working on another stupid build. It's Dark Effigy Totem using like Decaying Hex and Despair, and it's a gemling. Like, I don't know. It's stupid. It's bad, but it's so much fun. Come hang out, talk with me, chat with me, build some stupid builds with me, whatever it might be. And yeah, hopefully I see you guys there. But if not, hopefully I see y'all on the next video. All right, guys. Peace out. I think they added another line to the same stuff, but okay. Yo, what's up, Day Lee? How's it going? All right, let's go into this. Man, I just wish Ignite could be cooler. Why can't Ignite be cooler? Like, this is not even an Ignite build, guys. At the end of the day, this is not even an Ignite build. It's just a cast. It's just a Comet build. I'm not even using Ignite to do damage. Maybe next time around, maybe we'll try to make like a fireball build. Who knows? Or maybe we'll try to do it with like a martial weapon skill. We'll find like a good martial weapon skill. We'll find a weapon skill and try to scale off of that, and then try to work off of that. It sounds terrible. That sounds like a terrible idea. Because we're basically stuck to one weapon base for like the entirety of the game. And like anything outside of that weapon base is basically just useless. But you know what? I love terrible builds, right? I love shitty builds. And maybe we'll play like Sork? Maybe we'll play like Blood Mage or something? I don't even know. We'll figure it out. Why are Divines 112x? Yeah, it's inflation is going insane, bro. Inflation is going insane. I think part of it is that people are trying to hold on to their divines in preparation for D-Day. In preparation for D-Day, when all your builds get nerfed, then they can go and spend those, so they can spend those divines up making new builds. Put money on Blood Mage or Stormweaver. 80% of the latter are Stormweavers. Yeah, I'm not gonna do a Stormweaver. I'd probably make a Blood Mage. I'll probably do some like crits Blood Mage build or something like that. Some crit stacking Blood Mage build. We'll see. Do I invest? I mean, I don't think investing today is a bad idea, in the sense that I still do think that exalts are going to continue going, divines are going up every day still. I think divines are going to continue going up until GGG comes back. I mean, let's be real, right? The economy is just going to, the divines are going to keep going up regardless, I think. But I think like the rate that they're going up at right now is going to continue going up at this rate until GGG comes back from office and burns everything to the ground. What runes on both are best for poison concoction? Honestly, I would say I would personally use Spirit on it, but those are kind of expensive. Those are kind of really expensive. So really, in terms of like runes, there's not really too much you can do on those. There's really not much you can really put on it. It doesn't, nothing really benefits you, which is kind of sad. So it's just pure runes. Sadly, I'd say probably don't even bother. Probably just a waste of currency at that point. Warriors by house for divines is better pay off. Joke's on you, Killian. I'm known as the guy that anything that I invest into automatically doesn't work. Every time I've made an investment, it has never worked out on me, for me. but be glad, because I'm not making an investment. Every time I've told people to make an investment and I didn't make the investment myself, it usually works out. So you have confidence in that. Faith restored. Just make sure you don't make the same investment as I make. That's what it comes down to. If I tell you to make an investment, it should be fine, as long as I'm not investing myself. Before Incinerate gets nerfed and lightning arrows, but you know what? That's definitely not gonna happen. With how shitty this skill is, there is a 0% chance that this skill is gonna get nerfed. I also don't think lightning arrow is gonna get nerfed, like the skill itself, but you know, it's the stuff around lightning arrow that's gonna get nerfed. Lightning arrow itself is not the problem. It's fucking in the air. It's the heralds. We all know it. That's the real problem. A man can dream. Alrighty. Time to skedaddle, boys.